He came in, with his boots covered in mud, his old hat on his head, and a silence that was more disturbing than a scream. 3 salesmen laughed. They didn't even try to hide it. One of them looked at his colleague and said out loud, as if it were funny, "Does this dirty old man want financing?" They laughed, they pointed, they ignored, but they made a mistake that would cost dearly, because what they didn't know is that this dirty old man didn't come to ask for anything. He came to teach. The dealership's floor was so shiny it looked like a mirror. The cars, all luxury, gleamed under strategically placed lights, but it was the sound of boots stomping on the floor that made 3 salespeople look at each other with disdain. There he was, a man in a straw hat, worn pants, a faded shirt, and a look too calm for such an ostentatious environment. Joachim's every step seemed out of place, as if he were invading territory that didn't belong to him. In their eyes, of course. Did you lose your way to the farm, Grandpa?" whispered one of the salesmen, chuckling softly as he nudged his colleague next to him. "Let him look. Soon he'll ask how much he'll get with a horse down payment and the balance in chicken." Joachim heard, but he pretended not to. He was used to it. It wasn't the first time his presence had been underestimated because of his appearance. But here, something hurt differently. Maybe it was the mocking tone coming from young men old enough to be his grandchildren, or maybe it was because he just wanted to buy a car, nothing more. He stopped in front of an imposing black, brand-new pickup truck. He examined every detail with the eye of someone who knows what they're looking for: suspension, bed, traction, engine. But still, no one approached. The salespeople looked at each other as if to say, "He's leaving now. It's not worth it." Joachim took a deep breath. He needed to be seen. He walked over to the glass counter where 2 of them were laughing about something on their cell phones. "Good morning. I'd like some information about that F-250 over there." "Cash or rural financing?" asked the youngest, looking at Joachim's cracked earth boots. "Cash. If you want, I can pay now." The silence was immediate. The other vendor choked on the water he was drinking. But the pause was short-lived. It turned into a joke within seconds. Sure. Let me just call here at the cow bank to confirm your balance, okay?" Joachim looked at them both, not with anger, but with a kind of calm that hides strength. "Young man, do you always judge people like this, or is today a special day?" "Look, man, don't take it personally, but this store is for people with the right profile. You don't look like a regular here." And then came the sentence that froze the air. "Does this dirty old man want financing?" Said as if he wasn't even there, but loud enough to be heard. And he was. Joachim's eyes didn't lower. He simply adjusted his hat, turned, and walked slowly away. Each step was a silent response. Each heel mark left on the clean shop floor was a reminder. Not all that glitters is gold. Not all gold glitters. Outside, the sun was strong, but no brighter than the one burning inside. Joachim climbed into the old pickup truck he'd driven for over 10 years, the same one that had accompanied him through the worst floods, the bad harvests, the loss of his wife. And there, in the silence of the cabin, he spoke to the one person he always talked to in difficult times. "Did you see, Maria? They still think we're worth less because of what we wear, but I'm going back there. And it'll be different." The old engine roared along the dirt road as the dust rose slowly, as if refusing to leave the road. Joachim drove unhurriedly as he always did. The radio silence was broken only by the sound of his memories. The voice of his wife, dead almost 7 years ago, still echoed in his head, as if she was sitting right next to him. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Quim. But there comes a time, Maria, when the world needs to remember that respect doesn't depend on ironed clothes or expensive perfume." He gripped the steering wheel tightly. The humiliation still burned in his eyes. It wasn't about the car. It wasn't about the money. It was about something he'd felt since he was a boy. When his father was kicked out of the store for too much debt, even after delivering 3 oxen as payment. It was the same look that had stayed with him throughout his life, that of someone who didn't deserve to be where he was. Arriving at the farm, he parked the car in front of the porch. It was a simple house, without luxuries, but every brick told a story. There, he and Maria raised 2 children, lost one, and buried dreams and victories in the same land. The fields were lush green, freshly irrigated. The soybean plantation was thriving. The employees, few but loyal, already knew Joachim's silence and knew when he was brooding. "Mr. Joachim, is everything okay in the city?" asked Zay, the oldest of the employees. "The city remains the same, Zay. People who look at your clothes before looking you in the eye." "Do you want us to work something out?" said the boy, half jokingly, half seriously. "No, son. This is something that can be resolved with a head and a good accountant." That same afternoon, Joachim opened the black briefcase where he kept his most important documents: land contracts, production records, cooperative shares and stocks in input companies. A silent empire built without fanfare. In town, no one guessed. In fact, he made a point of keeping it that way. He'd always been wary of people who only approached you after finding out how much you had. The landline rang. It was Jandira, the family's loyal accountant, who had worked with him for 20 years. "Donna Jandira, do you know how much everything we have together is worth?" "Yes, I know, Mr. Joachim. And you can buy 3 of those dealerships if you want." "Yeah, but I only need one, the wrong one." She laughed on the other side, but knew it wasn't a joke. "Is this going to be a problem, Quim?" "No, Jandira. You'll set an example." The next day he spent the morning meeting with her and the lawyer. They both quickly understood what he wanted. It wasn't revenge, it was reparations, not just for himself, but for everyone who's ever been treated as invisible. The strategy was straightforward: silent negotiations with the chain's owners, who coincidentally were interested in selling that particular branch. Low profits, internal problems, and a high rate of complaints. Meanwhile, at the store, the salespeople continued their routines of empty ostentation. Photos next to cars to post on Instagram, laughs with important customers, and no idea that this dirty old man was about to change everything. At the farm, Joachim sat down at dusk with a strong black coffee and an old notebook. In it, he scribbled the first names he'd like to have by his side when he takes over the store. Humble, honest people with a history. People like him. "I don't just want to show that I have money, Maria. I want to show that you can have power without losing your soul." The orange sky reflected in the farm's lake. The decision was made. The wound that other people's pride had tried to open was now transformed into purpose. And when a simple man discovers his purpose, the world needs to listen, whether they want it or not. At the dealership's headquarters, a mirrored building in the shopping center, the meeting room was as cold as ever. White walls, expensive furniture, and a complete lack of soul. The branch's general manager, who had ridiculed Joachim, a man in a fitted blazer and a plastic smile, was discussing the quarter's figures with the directors. And they weren't good. "This unit here is bleeding. We've been holding on to the bone for 6 months now," said one of the directors, pointing to the screen. "The competition is eating them up. Poor after-sales service. Lots of complaints about service. There's something wrong with this store's culture. If we find a buyer, it's better to sell now than die in our arms." Silence, until one of the partners opened a newly arrived email. "Guys, I think we have an interested party." The attached document was clear and straightforward, a proposal to acquire the subsidiary in cash, no financing, no red tape. The bidder's name was little known in the urban environment, but one of the older director's eyes widened. "Joachim dos Santos, do you know?" "Yes, I know him. He owns half of the grain production here in the state, one of the largest in the agricultural sector. But I never imagined he would be this kind of investor. Do you want me to get in touch?" "No, we'll accept it. At this price, we're making a profit." And so, with a simple email, Joachim bought the store where he was humiliated. But he didn't show up the next day. He didn't make a point of arriving as the boss. He preferred strategic silence. For 2 weeks, paperwork was signed, contracts transferred, licenses updated. Everything was discreet. Not even the employees knew the store had changed hands. Meanwhile, Joachim did something rare. He walked the city's corridors like an ordinary man, observing. He went into diners, chatted with delivery drivers, listened to stories. He knew his goal wasn't just to restructure a business, but to reconnect a broken bridge between those who serve and those who despise. One morning, Jandira called to say, "Everything is ready. The store is yours now, Joachim." Then, it's time to pay a visit. At the dealership, the hustle and bustle was the same. Salespeople showing off expensive watches, bored receptionists feigning friendliness. When Joachim walked in, once again with his shabby clothes and serene gait, no one noticed that the floor had already changed hands. The same salesman who had mocked him caught a glimpse of him and whispered, "No way. The old man is back. Do you want to pay for the carpet in installments now?" Joachim calmly approached the counter. The boy pretended not to see, looking at his cell phone. "Can I speak to the manager?" "You have to make an appointment, sir." "The manager isn't available today." It was then that a new voice came from the back door. It was a man in a grey suit, with a serious face, one of the directors who had come to represent headquarters. "Attention, everyone. An urgent meeting will now be held with all employees. Conference room, please." The group entered suspiciously, some laughing, others bored, until the bomb was dropped. "The store has been sold, and the new owner is here." Eyes widened. The laughter ceased. The mocking salesman nearly dropped his coffee cup. "I would like you to welcome Mr. Joachim dos Santos." Absolute silence. Joachim entered. Same hat, same worn shirt, same boots. Only his gaze was different. No longer one of someone begging for attention, but of someone who no longer needed to ask for anything. "Good morning," he said, looking into each of their eyes. "Some of you here know me, or think you do. I came here the other day as a customer, and left as a joke. Today I'm back as a boss. And before you think this is revenge, let me tell you, it's transformation." The silence in the meeting room was thick as floodwater mud. The air conditioning hummed, trying to hide the embarrassment etched on every face. The salespeople didn't know where to look. The receptionist stared at her fingertips. The manager fidgeted nervously with the collar of his shirt. No one dared speak, as if they still hoped it was all a prank. But Joachim, standing before them, didn't smile. Nor did he get excited. He knew the weight he carried. And he knew that the greatest authority isn't the one imposed by shouting, but the one sustained in silence. When I came in here a few weeks ago, I was judged by my hat, my boots, my appearance. I was treated like a pauper. They laughed in my face, asked me if I wanted to finance a car I could have bought outright. They asked if I had any cattle to put down. He paused, looking directly at the boy who had said the phrase. The boy lowered his eyes, but Joachim didn't reveal his name. He didn't need to. That hurt me, not because I felt inferior, but because I saw, once again, how much this world still measures a person's worth by appearance. The HR manager tried to interrupt, with a wry smile. "Mr. Joachim, if there has been any misunderstanding, I can assure you that—" "Misunderstanding," he cut in, still calm. "A misunderstanding is when someone bumps into you on the street. This was a choice to humiliate." Tension mounted. Some vendors, visibly uncomfortable, crossed their arms. One of them, the same one who had made the harshest joke, decided to confront him. "Look, with all due respect, you're here now as the owner, but this is a luxury store. We have a diverse clientele. If we serve everyone who walks in, we'll lose our standard." Joachim walked toward him slowly. They stood face to face. "Do you think standards have anything to do with clothes? Standards are about character. And character doesn't shine in the shop window. It shines in how you treat those who can't give you anything." The young man swallowed hard. No one said anything else. Joachim then opened the briefcase he was carrying and took out some papers. He distributed them to each employee. It was a letter, a single page, titled New Store Culture Code. Some read silently, others frowned. The points were simple: service based on respect and active listening. Judging by appearance, zero tolerance. Reintegration program for former underserved clients. Mandatory course on empathy and ethics. Anonymous reviews by real customers every week. Whoever wants to stay will have to follow this. Whoever thinks it's too much is free to look for another store where appearance is worth more than decency. The final sentence was like a bell tolling in a public square, the first crack in the armor of arrogance. One of the younger salesmen timidly raised his hand. "May I speak, Mr. Joachim?" "Of course. I came here thinking it was just a matter of selling expensive cars and appearing rich. But my mother is a housekeeper. I know what it's like to be mistreated. I was ashamed when I saw him treated like that." "Your name?" "Vinicius." "Well then, Vinicius, you already understand what I want to do here. The rest, you'll have to decide." After the meeting, some employees left with their heads down. 2 handed in their resignations that same week. One of them blurted out as he left, "This old man is going to sink everything. The poor belong behind the counter, not in management." But Joachim again didn't respond. He preferred to invest his time in something else, rebuilding from within, with whoever was willing to walk alongside him. The following week, the store's advertising changed. The windows, previously filled with words like exclusivity and status, now they brought a new phrase in capital letters. "Here, what matters isn't how you get here, it's how you're treated." The store was different. Not to everyone's eyes. It still gleamed, the cars were polished, the coffee was still hot. But there was something new in the air. The forced smiles gave way to cautious silence. For the first time, employees were forced to think before speaking. The old automatic way of judging, serving, and dismissing customers no longer went unnoticed. But this also caused discomfort. In the back room, now called the culture and team room, Vinicius tried to motivate his colleagues, even while facing suspicious looks. "Guys, just treat everyone well. It doesn't matter if the customer is wearing flip-flops or a Rolex." "Easy for you, right, kid?" replied Douglas, one of the oldest. "You're the old man's favorite now. I sold a $700,000 SUV to a politician, so you think I'm going to pat a construction worker on the back? Then ask to leave, brother, because that's what's changing here." The atmosphere heated up. But before the discussion could get any further, the door opened. It was Joachim, and behind him, an unexpected figure. A woman in her early 50s, her hair tied back, her gaze firm and calm. She wore jeans and a simple shirt, and carried only a plastic briefcase. No one recognized her, until Joachim spoke. "This is Ms. Nyosa. She was a feed store manager for 20 years. She raised 3 children alone. One of them is an engineer today, the other a police officer, and the third a nurse at the regional hospital." The employees looked at each other. "She will take over oversight of customer service and culture, and the first thing she will do is listen to you." Douglas stepped forward defiantly. "Sorry, but has she ever worked with luxury cars?" Nyosa took a deep breath. She didn't smile, but her answer cut through the air. "I've served a man who arrived on a tractor with his daughter in his arms because he had no one to leave her with. And I've also been mistreated by a woman who arrived in an imported car thinking I was a servant. Luxury, my son, is knowing how to serve without humiliating yourself." Silence. Some employees looked away. Vinicius smiled discreetly. Joachim simply nodded and left the room. At the reception, another shock awaited the more arrogant. For the first time, the store was hiring someone with a visible disability. Jolma, 38, a paraplegic, walked in pushing her own chair, wearing a new badge on her chest and eyes full of life. She was the new person responsible for telephone service. At lunch that day, 2 older salesmen were complaining quietly. "Has this place become a charity house? If it continues like this, We'll be selling cars to retirees and gas station attendants. But fate has its ironies. That same afternoon, a customer walked into the store, wearing worn jeans, a paint-stained shirt, and a construction worker's cap. He walked straight up to Jolma, who greeted him with a friendly smile. "Good afternoon. Can I help you? I want to take a look at that white Hilux, but if it's too much trouble, I can come back another day." "Not at all, sir. You will be seen now." The client was accompanied by Vinicius, who maintained an attentive demeanor throughout the conversation. At the end, the man pulled a folder from his backpack. "Here are my documents. I want to buy it outright. But if they treat me like they treated my brother here last month, I'll leave without a second thought." Vinicius's eyes widened. "Your brother?" "Joachim, from the farm, you must remember." A chill ran down the boy's spine. He was the new owner's brother, and there he was, testing, observing, perhaps provoking, but also bringing a simple lesson. Humble eyes see everything that arrogant eyes ignore. That night, Joachim wrote in his notebook, "The seed germinates slowly, but when it breaks through the ground, no one can stop it." The weeks passed like a river in flood, slow on the outside, but with strong currents on the inside. The atmosphere in the store was no longer the same, but the tension was still there. Those who chose to stay were divided between those who wholeheartedly adapted and those who pretended to accept just to keep their jobs. Joachim watched everything silently. I would have preferred to read between the lines. One of the first signs that something was truly changing came on a grey, drizzly Tuesday. It was the kind of day the store was usually empty. No one wanted to go out and look at cars in the drizzle. But that day, a woman came in, dressed simply, her hair wet from the rain, her gaze hesitant. "Miss, can I just take a peek?" he said to the receptionist. Jolma, on the other side of the table, smiled. "Yes, you can. Here, no one looks down on anyone who just wants to look." The woman smiled back, moved. "The last time I came in here, they asked me to leave. They said this place wasn't for people like me." She was greeted by Vinicius, who had already become a benchmark for customer service. For over an hour, she explored the showroom like a child at a fair, asking questions she'd always wanted to know but never had the courage to. In the end, she didn't buy anything. But she left with a phrase that echoed throughout the aisles. "This time, I felt like a person." The phrase reached Joachim's ears, and he wrote it down in his notebook. "Before selling a car, we have to restore dignity." Behind the scenes, however, resistance still bubbled. Douglas, increasingly isolated, tried to undermine the new climate with sarcasm disguised as a joke. Now, this has become therapy. "How do you feel when you look at a V6 engine? Will there be a group hug session after the sale?" But few laughed. The old hegemony of mockery was beginning to crumble. Then something unexpected happened. In the middle of the afternoon, a man arrived at the store, wearing a rural cooperative t-shirt, unshaven and with a determined stride. He carried a canvas bag and a look filled with something no one could immediately identify, somewhere between gratitude and urgency. He asked to speak to Joachim. Joachim recognized him instantly. "Tonho, is that you, young man?" "It's me, Mr. Joachim. But I don't think you even remember me properly." "Why not? You worked with me for a few years on the farm. You were good at what you did. You suddenly disappeared." Tonho lowered his eyes. "Yeah, I had some problems, drinking. I got into trouble. I ended up in jail for a while, but I'm clean now. I'm trying to rebuild." Joachim was silent for a few seconds. He looked at the man, as if he could see inside. "Did you come to ask for a job?" "No, I came to thank you, because it was a conversation you had with me over 10 years ago that made me not give up. And when I saw that you bought this store, I understood that there is still room in the world for those who believe in people." Joachim held back his emotions. "And why not work here? This store is made for that, for people who have fallen but still know how to get back up." Tonho started the next day as a general services assistant. Some people frowned, but he was efficient, discreet, and above all, grateful. He soon became friends with Jolma and Nusa, the pillars of the new culture. Meanwhile, in town, something curious began to happen. Small business owners, delivery drivers, retirees, people who had never set foot in the store began to show up. Some said they were just looking, but they left with Vinicius's number in their pockets and a new sparkle in their eyes. But not everyone was happy with the change. At the city's trade association, traditional business owners began to whisper, "That farmer is ruining the store's standard. It's turned into a market. People coming in wearing flip-flops. This tarnishes the image of our city." And at an elite lunch, one of the store's former partners said in an acidic tone, "He wants to teach dignity, but he forgets that status is also power." Joachim, upon learning this, responded simply with a note placed at the entrance of the store in a wooden frame. "Power that does not recognize the dignity of others is just vanity with a brand name." The article came out on a Wednesday morning. A large headline, a black and white photo of the store's facade, and the title in bold letters, "Tradition Under Threat. Luxury Dealership Becomes a Center of Populism and Scares Away Premium Clientele." It was the city's leading newspaper. It circulated among lawyers, business people, politicians, and those who considered themselves owners of good taste. The article spoke of declining standards, lack of a target audience, unqualified clientele, and management with an outdated view of the market. It didn't name names, but its intent was as clear as the midday sun. Joachim read the report calmly, sitting on the farm's porch, coffee in hand and a distant look in his eyes. Beside him, Nusa leafed through the same newspaper, anger evident on her face. "This is disgusting, Mr. Joachim. They called the store a street market because we serve ordinary people. They want to embarrass us." He didn't answer right away. He finished his coffee, folded the newspaper carefully, and said, "If you're uncomfortable, it's because we're touching where it hurts." At the store, employees read the article as a direct attack. Vinicius felt personally attacked. He, who had come from the outskirts of the city, was now seen as a symbol of the decadence of luxury. Jolma cried in the bathroom. Tonho, nervous, offered to go and get satisfaction from the journalist. But Joachim had another plan. Late that afternoon he had a notice printed. Not on plain paper, but on recycled brown paper, the same paper used for the local market. And he placed the text in a frame at the store entrance, next to the sign. "Notice to the city. To those who say this store has lost its standard, we have something to say. This store has never been about status. It was never about high heels or expensive watches. This store is about people. People who work, who get up early, who save money to pay the deposit. People who want to be treated with respect, even if they come in wearing flip-flops. People who have been humiliated for looking out of place. If this bothers you, we're sorry, but that is the standard we choose to maintain. Joachim dos Santos, countryman, boss by accident, people by conviction." The next day, the store opened to a quiet line of ordinary people. They were bricklayers, shop assistants, seamstresses, and small farmers. They came not to buy, but to say thank you. One of them, hat in hand, looked Joachim in the eye and said, "Thank you for reminding us that we deserve to enter through the front door too." But the elite didn't give up. A group of business people gathered at an expensive restaurant and organized a boycott. Longtime customers who bought imported cars began to disappear. There was a coordinated effort to isolate Joachim. Even a local influencer posted a video saying, "This store has become a poor person's NGO. I want exclusivity, not coffee and salt bread." And then came the twist that no one expected. The following week, a mysterious client made an appointment. He said he wanted to speak with the owner in person. He arrived in a sedan, wearing a simple dress shirt and worn shoes. Joachim greeted him, as he did everyone. "Mr. Joachim, I saw the article, I saw the statement, and I want you to know that Brazil needs more places like this. We're just trying to do the right thing, man." "That's right. And sometimes the right thing is expensive, but I came to buy, cash, 3 trucks, 1 for me and 2 to donate to communities that handle patient transportation in rural areas. Joaquim tried to contain his emotion. May I ask your name? I'm just a Brazilian tired of seeing those who have little being treated as if they were worth less. News of the purchase spread quickly. The influencer who had criticized the store deleted the video. The newspaper, embarrassed, tried to contact them to revisit the story, and the elite remained silent. In the farm room, Joaquim scribbled in his notebook, "When the voice of the countryside disturbs the city, it is a sign that the harvest is near." Mornings at the store had changed. Now they began with a small gathering among the employees, nothing formal, just coffee and a quote of the day, often taken from Joaquim's worn notebook. Quotes like, "Don't judge someone who has mud in their shoes. It could be fertile soil." The store was thriving, not just in sales, but in reputation, in humanity. Old customers were returning. New faces were appearing. Small business owners, women who were heads of households, people who had previously passed by on the sidewalk, staring in the window, embarrassed to enter, were now welcome, and they knew it. Joaquim, for the first time, felt he could walk away. Nusa, Vinicius, and Jolma gathered on a Saturday afternoon. "I'm thinking about taking a few steps back, not leaving, but letting you guys take over more. The store can't depend on me. It has to stand on its own 2 feet." Nusa nodded with a slight smile. "But you are the soul of this place, Joaquim. The soul remains. It just doesn't need to be on the counter every day." He intended to use this time to take care of the farm, travel the countryside, and help other social projects. But the following week, something unexpected happened. It was a letter, handwritten, an old envelope, the paper folded and marked with age. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. It belonged to his eldest son, the one he hadn't seen in 18 years. João had left home, fighting with his father when he was still young. He wanted to be a businessman in the big city. He said that life on the farm was for people without ambition. He left angry, after an argument that still hurt Joaquim more than any humiliation he had suffered in the store. Since then, no contact. The letter was short and sharp. "Dad, I have a boy in the hospital. My son. He has cancer. We have nothing left to sell. All I have left is you." Joaquim read and reread. He felt a lump in his throat that didn't come from pride. It came from guilt. He, who had welcomed so many strangers in recent months, now had to face his own blood, and the pain that money couldn't cure. The next day, he went to the capital's hospital. He brought supplies, money, but most of all, he brought his silence. In the waiting room, he saw his son for the first time in almost 2 decades. João was haggard, with sunken eyes and a stubble on his face. The reunion was cold, but real. "I didn't come to rub it in your face. I came because of the boy." "I know," said the son, head down. "But thanks anyway." His grandson, Lucas, was 9 years old. He was undergoing intensive treatment, but when he saw his grandfather, he smiled weakly. "Are you the grandpa who has a cow?" "Yes, I am. And you're the grandson who'll be riding with me as soon as I get better." They stayed together for 2 days, long enough to reopen wounds and perhaps begin to heal. Upon returning to the city, Joaquim said nothing to anyone. But something in his expression had changed. Nusa noticed. "Did something happen, Quim?" "It happened. The past asked for forgiveness." Days later, Joaquim called a meeting and handed over a folder with documents and a handwritten letter. "This store now has 3 new partners, Nusa, Jolma, and Vinicius. I've already spoken to the accountant. You're the real owners. I'll stay on as an advisor, but the management is yours." Silence. Jolma wept. Vinicius didn't know what to say. Nusa squeezed his hand tightly. "But why, Joaquim?" "Because you represent what I always wanted to be, someone who doesn't give up on people." At the end of the day, he returned to the farm. He sat on the porch, the sunset in front of him. the old notebook on his lap. He wrote in a firm hand, "I understand, Maria. What I did with this store, I need to do now with my son, rebuild, and maybe that's the final mission, to fix where it hurt the most." Days on the farm returned to the sound of cicadas, the smell of wet earth, and the pleasant silence of unhurried mornings. Joachim now divided his time between the fields and the hospital. His grandson, Lucas, was responding well to treatment. His son, João, still maintained a certain rigidity in his gaze, as if the decades of separation had built a wall between them. But little by little, that wall was beginning to crack. "You've changed, Dad. Or maybe you're the one who's watching now." At the store, life was intense. Nusa led with a firm hand and an open heart. Jolma had become a key figure in the reception area, now better equipped, with accessibility for wheelchair users and the elderly. Vinicius coordinated sales with a rare poise for his age. He blended numbers with empathy and taught newcomers with phrases reminiscent of Joachim's. "Here we don't sell cars, we give back respect." But the old man was missed. Not because he needed to be there, but because he represented something everyone felt, even when they didn't say it: security. It was one night, sitting on the porch, that Joachim had the idea that would seal his legacy. He opened the notebook and wrote at the top of the page, "Seed Project." The idea was simple yet powerful, to transform the store into a bridge between the countryside and the city. A program that would provide sales training, customer service, and basic mechanics to young people from the countryside, children of small farmers, orphans of opportunity who could learn there and then take the knowledge back to their communities. The next day, he called the three partners together and showed them the project. "I want this store to become a school, and I want everyone who leaves here to know more than just how to sell. I want them to leave knowing how to look people in the eye." Jolma was moved. "This changes lives, Mr. Joachim. That's what life taught me. Now it's time to give back." But the project required something of him: detachment. For the idea to grow, he needed to step back completely, allow the new leaders to make decisions, make mistakes, and learn. Joachim thought a lot, and wrote even more. "A tree only becomes a forest when it stops protecting its seeds and lets them fly." He decided to announce his permanent departure. He did so with the same simplicity with which he arrived at the store on his first day. No stage, no grandiose speech. He gathered everyone in the back workshop, the company's most humble space. "My friends, my time has come. Now it's your turn." Some didn't understand. "But are you going to sell?" "No, I'll plant it in different soil. I'll leave the trunk, but keep the roots." He handed Nusa a wooden box. Inside were the notebooks where he had jotted down every sentence, every idea, every lesson he had learned since the day he had been humiliated there for the first time. "Everything is here, but what really matters is already in your hands." He hugged Jolma, who was crying silently. "You taught me that a firm voice fits a fragile body." He shook Vinicius's hand. "You are proof that humility has no age." Finally, he looked at everyone and said, "Respect isn't just a nice word. It's a daily practice. If a customer leaves here embarrassed, you've failed. But if they leave smiling, even without buying anything, then you've won." That night, Joachim left the store walking alone. But not with the weight of an end, but rather with the lightness of someone who had passed the baton. He returned to the farm. He mounted his horse for the first time in months and galloped in silence to the overlook where, years ago, he had buried his wife's ashes. "Maria, I'm done. Now I can go back." 6 months had passed. Time seemed to have passed slowly, but it had left its mark. Joachim now ran a small project on the farm, literacy classes for farmers' children and discussion groups with rural youth. His grandson, Lucas, was in remission. His son, João, was still rebuilding, not just financially, but emotionally. In the city, the Seed Project had already graduated its first class, 15 young people from the countryside were now learning from the store's own salespeople. The dealership had become, as Joachim had dreamed, a place of transition between worlds. A space where appearance no longer defined the entrance. Joachim hadn't returned since leaving. He wanted to give it space. But that morning, something called him back. Maybe it was longing. Maybe it was just the desire to see for himself if the seed had taken root. He wore the same faded shirt from the first day. He slipped on his boots, dirty with dried mud, and off he went. When he arrived at the store, no one recognized him immediately. It was on purpose. He stood at the door, watching. A young man, one of the project's scholarship recipients, welcomed a humble woman with a kindness that brought tears to her eyes. "Would you like some water? Some coffee? Would you like me to bring you a chair?" "Young man, I've never been treated like this, thank you." Joachim smiled inside. At reception, Jolma commanded firmly, now accompanied by a new visually impaired employee. In management, Nusa discussed improvements with a group of new apprentices. And Vinicius clearly guided 2 salespeople, showing a simple graph. Don't worry about today's sales. Worry about next week's customer remembering how they were treated here. Joachim entered in silence. He sat in the waiting area. You took in every detail. Everything was there, but there was something new in the air. The store now had a soul, and it was visible. Until a young new employee approached him without knowing who he was. "Good afternoon, sir. May I help you?" "No, I'm just looking." "Make yourself at home. Everyone is welcome here. We believe respect isn't extra, it's a given." Joachim laughed softly. He almost cried. Vinicius saw him. He froze for a second. Then he smiled broadly, approached, and gave him a big hug. "You're back." "I didn't come back, Vinicius. I never left. I just left the field open for you guys to play." Nusa and Jolma came too. The 3 new partners, now full leaders, surrounded the old man with affection, like grateful children to their father. "Look around, Quim," said Nusa. "It's all yours." But he corrected her tenderly. "It's not mine. It belongs to the person who will never again be afraid to walk through that door." On his way out, Joachim left a final message, written on a piece of recycled wood, hanging next to the store logo. Joachim, the man who arrived being called a dirty old man, says goodbye as a symbol of dignity, courage, and transformation. His greatest asset is not the hectares of land, nor the trucks he bought. It's in the people he taught to look differently, to be respected, believing in the invisible, and to understand that respect cannot be bought. It is built.